Hi everyone, welcome to Facebook Live. I'm Tracy from the decorating room today, filling in for Desiree, and I'm going to be decorating a Halloween cake. And I'm actually going to start from the icing of the cake. So I've got my cake already crumb coated. You can see the cake right through that. So the crumb coat, what that does is that just kind of sealed in all my crumbs, and it's just going to give me a good base to put my top layer on. So it's going to, kind of seal in the crumbs, and it's going to be really smooth. So I will show you how I do that. And I'm going to use this bucket icing that we've got here, and I'm just going to get the icing on there, kind of hold the back here. Now you can put icing on a cake using an icer tip. I actually just like to put it right on with the spatula. It's just a preference. So however you like to get it on, just get it on there. And the technique that I'm doing, I'm going to be doing a sprinkles around the edge. So you definitely want to have your cake freshly iced so that the sprinkles are going to, adhere to the side of the cake. So if this cake was already if it was already ice and it's been in the refrigerator for a while, it's going to have a nice, you can see actually I can touch it like that. So it's pretty firm. And your icing, your sprinkles will actually not stick to something like that. So you definitely want to put a layer of icing on fresh right before you do that. So I'm gonna just get the last part on here. And now when you get it on here like this, it doesn't matter, it's gonna be messy, as you can see. It's kind of a hot mess right now, but we're going to smooth all of that out. So, all right, so I'm just gonna give my cake a spin here.
Robin from New Zealand saying hi.
Hi Robin from New Zealand, that's awesome. Okay, so what I do when I smooth the side of my cake, so I'm just gonna do a real quick smooth here with this blade that I've got. Now you can use a spatula, I prefer this blade. It's got a nice straight edge, and we can link this blade up in the show notes.
Nicole wants to know what size cake you're using.
Okay, so I've got a 6-inch round, and it's 4.5-inch high. So it's a 6 by 4. All right, so I want to make sure I've got I've got a little divot there, so I'm just going to add a little bit more right there because I want to just make sure this is as smooth as possible. Okay, so I'm going to wipe off my blade here, and I've got a pan of hot water going on the stove. And what that's going to do is it's going to heat up the metal, and it's going to smooth the icing out better than you can just from using your spatula. So I'm going to dip it out of there. I'm just going to wipe it down so it's not wet, but just it's got a little bit of heat to it.
Gina wants to know if you can buy that icing tub.
Yes, you can get that on Wilton.com. We can get that at Michael's, Walmart. Okay. So I don't know, did you see that? How pretty smooth that got compared to right there?
Angela would like to know what icing you're using.
Okay, Angela, the icing that I'm using today is this bucket here. It's a 4-pound icing bucket. It's like a medium consistency. So it's not real stiff. If you're making flowers or something like that, we do sell stiffer icing. But this is just a nice consistency to, ice your cake. So I'm going to I don't like that angle, so I'm going to go back here. Again, I'm just wiping off the water. I just want the heat from that spatula is what I'm looking for.
Michelle wants to know, did you whip your icing before you started?
I did not. I kind of stirred it in the bucket a little bit, but I definitely didn't whip it. It just kind of stirred, just stirred it, that was all.
And Ingrid would like to know if that blade is used for lifting cakes as well.
You can. We have a bigger one that would probably do better. This is just a small. This is kind of for maybe cutting some dough. Let's see, scraping. Like kind of what I'm doing here. You can ice the side of your cake with it because it's really you can see it's really straight. I know like when you're chopping vegetables or something like that, you can kind of scoop it in. See how there's like a little cup here? So if you've got your cutting board and you're cutting some things here or fruit, whatever you're cutting, you can kind of scoop it up and then put it into a bowl pretty easily. So, all right, so I'm gonna just do the top now. That looks pretty good.
One of our viewers wants to know if you can do this with homemade buttercream as well.
Okay, so someone's asking if you can do this with homemade buttercream. I would say yes, definitely. Any buttercream that you use, you can do with the hot, I'm assuming they mean with the hot knife. Yes, yeah, I do all the time. I've got a recipe at home that I use, and it works perfect. So when I'm here at work, I use this recipe, or excuse me, I use this bucket icing, and then when I'm at home, I've got my own recipe. And yeah, it works perfect both ways, so we're good. And I try not to take the problem with me icing a cake is I'm so particular on how it looks, so it takes me a while usually. So I'm trying not to take forever, but I wanted.
Speaking of that, Carolina wants to know how many times you should smooth it out.
Okay, so Carolina wants to know how many times to smooth it out. I do it until it looks good. There's been times when I've gotten a little too close to the cake, like when you've got that crumb coat going on. So there's been times when I've, accidentally went around too many times, and all of a sudden, you're starting to see the cake. You're like, whoops, but it's okay because you can, go back over it. So in fact, my edge is up here a little. I'm going to see if I can get that one spot a little bit better. So I'm going to see I'm going to angle my blade up a little bit higher. Let's see if that'll do the trick here.
Tracy, can you remind our viewers what we'll be working on today?
Okay, so we're doing the Halloween cat cake, and I'll show you what I mean by that in a minute. I've got a cookie cutter that I'm going to put up in the top of the cake, and we're going to use the cutter as a guide to put some sugars on the cake. So it's going to be really pretty and festive for sure. So I just want to go one more pass around my top, and then we will be done with this.
Should the buttercream be room temperature, or can you refrigerate it before?
So I would not refrigerate my icing before I ice a cake because you want it to be soft. I would definitely have it room temperature. All right, and as I said before, I could go for like longer than this. I'm gonna stop here. This is bothering me a little bit, but I'm just gonna let it go. I'm gonna not be perfectionist right now and just let that top go. It is what it is. So I can move on to the fun part, right? So I'm gonna turn off my stove here, just make sure that's good to go. Okay, so on the bottom of my cake, I'm going to be putting some sprinkles. So I've got a mix here. This is our 6-cell mix. It's got some ghosts, it's got some jimmies, some nonpareils, some black and orange sugars. And I also added some jumbo nonpareils. So you see the purple and the green and the orange. You can get those at Michael's. And I'm going to, okay, so my cake is on a 6-inch board. And the reason I put it on a board that was the same size as the cake, because I want to lift the cake off of this board and go ahead and put it on something smaller. So I've got a little 6-inch, so I got that on the board there. And I've got a little 4-inch cake 4-inch pan right here. Now you can use a bowl, you can use anything that's gonna be smaller than your diameter of your cake. So I'm just gonna gently, it's gonna be a little tricky just because your hands are in there, but there we go. And I just kinda wanna make sure I got it level, that it's in the center. Okay, wipe my hands there. All right, so I got a bowl of sprinkles here. And I'm just gonna move this over, attach. Okay, now I just want the sprinkles to be on the edge. And if you've caught my video a couple weeks ago, I've covered the whole thing. We're just gonna go to the edge here. So I'm just gonna grab a little bit in the bowl. You can kind of just toss it, kind of put it up there. It's gonna have some way up there maybe. And kind of down. So it depends on what you're looking for. If you wanted to do the whole thing in sugars or sprinkles, you totally could. If you wanted to just do like I'm doing here, you've got just some random. It's high, it's low. If you nick it or something, you can just put a sprinkle there. There we go.
Where can our viewers find our homemade buttercream recipe?
So you can make a homemade buttercream recipe on Wilton.com. We've got the link there for a couple different, I think there's one that's got meringue powder in it. Okay, so you're basically just going around the bottom. And you've got this on a pan just so you can kind of catch, you see it's all kind of falling at the bottom. And you definitely want to put it on something so that you're not, you know, nonpareils aren't running all over your house. So I think that looks pretty good. I'm going to add some small, so what happens a lot of times with like the little, you can see like the little tiny nonpareils and the sugars, they kind of get lost a little bit in that jumbo mixture, so you can always go back and add some later. And mix some here. And I've always got my hand, I don't know if you can see, my left hand is kind of got, it's always on this cake. So I've got my hand between the board and that bowl. So I'm constantly having my hand on both things here, so I'm not gonna tip it over. Just remember to do that, because it's, you know, the cake is heavy, so it's not gonna move too much, but you know, just in case you don't want it to tip over while you're in the middle of this. All right, I'm almost at the back. Then I'm going to go around. Usually I go around and just, you know, double check. Did I miss any areas? Does something feel like it needs to be better? You know, more fuller?
Tracy, what can you do with the leftover sprinkles?
So you can put them in a Ziploc bag. You can use them maybe for, let's see, if you've got something coming up where you need some cupcakes, maybe feel like your kid's school, or if you want to just, you know, if you've got a potluck party coming up. Yeah, you can use, they definitely won't go to waste. And just to be safe too, if you didn't want to, you know, I made kind of a big amount here knowing, and I knew I wasn't going to use all of it, but I did make more just so you could see it in the bowl. But start out maybe with like a half a cup, maybe something smaller, and you can always add to it. So in case you need more, if you're afraid of making too many and you're never going to use them again or something like that, then just make a small amount. And you can also too, you know, instead of mixing them together like that, you could do them all separate. So you could put, you know, separate sugars in a bowl, separate nonpareils in a bowl, and put them on separately. Then that way you don't have, you know, the mixture that's left over, but you still have your sprinkles that will be left over. So it's not all jumbled into one mix. You can keep them separate, so you could do that too.
We're getting some fun ideas on what our viewers like to do with leftover sprinkles, like put them in Rice Krispie treats or use them on pretzels.
Yeah, oh definitely. Yeah, you could drizzle some pretzel sticks and the rods. Yeah, that would be a good idea. Cookies, you can even like ice some cookies, put them on there. All right, I think I'm gonna stop here. So I think that's probably pretty good. And the next thing I'm gonna make sure, let's see, I'm going to do is wipe this really quick. Okay, so I'm gonna move this to a turntable, and then that way I can, sorry, I can't talk and move a cake at the same time apparently. So I'm gonna put the cutter on top of the cake here. So I'll show you, and you definitely just wanna get it off of that little, little plate or little bowl or whatever you've got, just so you got a little more security here. Okay.
Can you repeat what size cake this is?
Yep, so this is a 6-inch round, and I did 2 layers and I filled it, so it's a 4-inch high cake. Now you could do a 6-inch high, you could do a 5-inch high, however you like. You can even do a 2-inch high if you wanted to. You don't even have to do 2 layers, but that's what this one is, a 6x4. And now this is part of our Halloween. We have a 18-piece cutter set for Halloween. So you could have done maybe let's see, there's bats in there. I think there's pumpkins. This is a cat, a ghost, anything that you want to put on top. So I'm just going to put the cutter, kind of eyeball the center about right there. Okay, now I'm going to put some black sugars on, and I'm going to put them in the cutter. So the cutter is going to act as a guide so that the sugar's not going everywhere. And what I do with that is I put them in a bowl, because the sugars are going to come, in a little sprinkle bottle. But if you try to just sprinkle them, you don't really have control, and they could, definitely get all over the place. So definitely put them in a bowl before you decide to do this. And I'm going to put them mostly in the center. Now, it's going to be really tricky, because some of this, like especially this cat, he's got some ears and a tail that's really, really thin. So it's going to be really hard to get in that small area. So a lot of times I will put more in the center, and then I'm going to take a brush and just kind of brush it away. So I'll show you what I mean by that. I'm going to just get them a little bit more. You don't want to cake it in there too much, because what's going to happen is when you go to move the cake, if they're just, you know, a bunch of sugar sitting on top of each other, they're not really adhered to the icing at all. And so, you know, they have a tendency to kind of fall over. So it might get a little bit out of your area. If you've got it too thick and you try to move it, it's probably gonna, you know, it's gonna shift on you a little bit. So you want to get it too thick, but you also want to make sure you know, got everything covered.
Tracy, we have some viewers asking if using a funnel or a decorating bag would be easier. Do you have any suggestions?
So they want to know if I could use a funnel or a decorating bag. So the funny thing about that is I did try the decorating bag yesterday, and I used a parchment bag, and it worked somewhat. So actually what it worked for the best, of course, was where the small areas were. But the problem was the sugar was getting a little stuck in there, and it wasn't, you know, coming out as easy. So I figured I would show you this way, but you could definitely try it. It wasn't a terrible idea. It did work, but I preferred doing it this way, I guess. So yeah, okay, so I'll put a little more in there. Let's see if I can brush more to the front. Now I don't want to brush too close to the sugar, because I'm trying to, not get it on the buttercream, because once you get the brush on the buttercream, it's going to pull it a little bit, so it'll be a little bit harder to, basically the sugar is just going to kind of blend into the buttercream. It's not going to sit on top, so just going to be a little in. Let's see, I don't know if you can see. And I'm trying to get it away from the edges a little bit, because I can see that I went a little more generous on the edges. And then when I go to pull the cutter off, it'll just be kind of caked on the edge. So I don't want it to, it's kind of a fine line between too much sugar and not enough sugar, if that makes sense. All right, so I did a little bit, tiny bit in this tail. And a little bit in the ears. So I'll probably go one more little pass here, and then a little bit right there. Okay, I'm actually going to take a smaller brush too. Let's see if I can get that in there. It's hard for me to see. I'm actually going to, since I have it on the turntable, I'm going to turn it just a little bit so I can really get in there. And yeah, the different size brushes help a little bit too, because this is definitely a smaller one than I started out with, so it makes it a little easier to get in there. Okay. And I'm going to turn it this way. And I would do it too if you were at home, just kind of do what I'm doing, turn it around, because now I'm seeing spots that I didn't necessarily see when I was behind it. And since this is the front of the cake, I want to make sure I get the right. Okay, maybe a little foot there.
Tracy, can you ask our audience what they'll be making for Halloween?
Sure, yeah, in the comments, if you want to let us know what you're making for Halloween, if you're doing Rice Krispie treats or, you know, cakes, cookies. Let us know. Show us your pictures. That's always fun. I love seeing all your pictures that you guys do. Okay, one little spot here, and I think we might be good. Okay. All right, so I got them all covered, and you're just going to gently lift it and hope for the best. Just kidding. Make sure no sugars are falling out. Okay, so that is actually not too bad. So what I would suggest, if you don't love the fact that there's extra sugar, you can, let this come. You can kind of let it get a crust on it, and you could take a small brush and just gently, this is not crusted, so I don't know. Oh, it worked a little bit. But anyway, so when you have your crusted cake, it will be easier to just kind of brush those off. Or if that's not the case, and if you just did this and you have to, hurry up and take this to a party or something like that, what I would maybe do is just add some extra sugars just along the edge. So it, you know, you still see the cat, but then you're, you know, just got a little bit more decorative on the edge. Something like that. Or you could add, you know, orange sugar. Yeah. Yeah. All right, so I'm going to move this to a stand just so you can see the final look. Okay, get my hand under there and get that out of the way. Okay, whenever I'm putting something down too, I'm always grabbing a second spatula for, it's almost like your second hand, just because I don't like your hands are gonna kind of get stuck under there. So I just use that and just pull it across. Oh, and then just make sure it's centered. I always do that. It's hard to see what I'm doing in the back. So, all right. So that is our sugar cookie cutter cake. And remember that you could do this with any cutters. You could do like a Valentine's with some hearts. You could do a Christmas with a tree. That would look really pretty with maybe some green and red sprinkles. Maybe we'll do that next time. But anyway, so yeah, so show us your pictures and we'd love to see what you've done. We're actually going to be back in 2 weeks. Desiree will be back. And thanks for watching.